All right.
But I probably had my first real, I've never kind of answered this question this way, Rick, but you tend to bring out things for people. My grandpa had 25,000 logo golf balls, alphabetized. And if you're not a golfer, if you like logos, like a Lakers logo on a golf ball, that's what a logo golf ball is. My grandpa had $25,000 golf balls, and he had passed away. And my dad was the executor of the will. And my dad was like, "You think you could sell them?" Joking around, and I was like, "Yeah, I do." I was 15, and I went to an AOL golf message board and posted that I had them. And literally, a week later, my dad was driving to like outside of Cleveland, Ohio, to sell somebody 25,000 golf balls for $5,000, and my cut of that was $100. I remember that. And so that's when I was like, oh, people will buy online. And 10 years later, I was arguing why people, and this is 2005, why the majority of people would buy online if we made it easier. And you would think by then it was easy. It wasn't marketed right. So that gave me a lot of opportunity to show it. It was easy for anybody that was comfortable with it, but really difficult for an industry that was mass marketing, PR and CR focused, didn't really care about targeted or direct marketing.
So you're talking about public relations and customer.
CR is community relations for an NBA team, especially, but any sports team. Historically, they've all, like, their marketing department was one PR person that traveled with the team and one community relations person that would take the players out into market when they were in their home state at the time. Like, they didn't really have anybody else working anything that this group would know as a marketing role. It was just then sales roles or sponsorship roles or like arena operations, maintenance type roles.
So how did that change for you in marketing over time?
The benefit was I could prove that I was driving sales. I was a brand marketer, but you can track it. And I was like, just look at these numbers. And people thought they were a joke, right? And so they called the CFO in and like, what the hell is this? And he's like, yeah, it's right. And then it was that type of dumbed down. I was like, can you do more of it? Like, it was like some internet room that I could go back to and just push more buttons. Like, yeah. And then, now teams have 10 to 30 people, depending on how big their brand is, just in this type of smaller area of the business.
As far as marketing, how big of a thing has social media been to be able to expand your reach and your product kind of?
I mean, it's drastically changed how you are forced to empower your staff and trust them. I mean, an NBA team is really run by 25 to 30-year-olds, because you have the best players are about that age on the court. The best salespeople in the back room are about that age, and your social people are that age. So you really have to trust a young staff with a billion-dollar brand. And so there is a lot of risk with that, but the best teams are the ones that have figured out how to not be as controlling as sports teams can be.
So when you're looking for like a candidate to fit into your kind of your calculation, like what do they look like? What kind of skills do they have? What kind of things do they generate?
Yeah, like if I posted a job to like teamworkonline.com is a great job board for sports jobs. You can put yes, no questions. And so like I was hiring an email marketing person, and I was like, do you know how to use this platform? Do you know HTML? And people just flat out lie, as you should, because if you answer no, there's no chance I'll call you because I'm filtering by that. So those technical jobs are really tough to prove until you get them in, or until you can have like a live Zoom and be like, hey, show me it, right? But up to that point, you're really looking for like, all right, who have they worked for that I might know? That helps. Or like, how have they handled the soft skills related to communicating to me? Because typically to get to me and to get in front of a hiring manager, you have to apply online, and then you have to go on LinkedIn, or you have to find their email address, or send them a letter, do something to stick out. I mean, I had 2,000 people apply for one social media job a year ago. I mean, and so I I talked to nearly 100 people on the phone actually, and that's a lot for most of it. But to stick out, you have to reach out. Well, some people are too aggressive. Some people are too long-winded. Some people are kind of passive voice, like you don't even know what they're asking because they're a little nervous. So those things really go a long way, because if you're handling these moments right, then there's a comfortability that allows me to be like, all right, let's talk about the job, right? So there are these soft skills that are really tough to get on paper, to get filtered, to get called. But once you do, how do you handle a Zoom interview? Like, do you have a bad camera? Do you have bad lighting? You know, those sort of things matter when you're making very stereotypical judgments in a 30-minute conversation. But if you want to get a technical side, it really matters what the job is and what the level is. You know, you tend, it's kind of funny with social jobs, sometimes you'll see 15 years of experience. It's like they invented social media then, to a degree. If that's the case, like, these guys should have a lot more money than whatever they're making. So it's like in sports especially, it's like, you know, if you're in your early to late 20s, it's not like you have 10 years of experience, but you might have worked a summer or a season with your college sports team, basketball team or whatever. You know, you might not have gotten much out of it at the end of the day, but as long as you get 1 or 2 bullet points of conversation, it allows you to add it to your LinkedIn. It gives you something to talk about that is a little bit different than the person that didn't do that. And so my version of that, when I was 18, I worked at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, you know, Indianapolis 500, Brickyard 400, but this was the Formula One race. And there was a piece of paper that printed off one printer, and I ran it from that media room to the other media room across the way. There was email, I don't know, there was fax machines, there was everything. There was networks they could send it on back then even, but they didn't. It was like they just wanted a runner, and that's what I did. And then 2 years later, I was a pit reporter interviewing drivers, you know, and that was before I was 21.
Was it your dependability that let you move along? Like, what do you feel like allowed you to progress on that path?
Yeah, I mean, I always took all those jobs probably too seriously, you know, like, and I say it that way because, you know, it can be stressful and give you a heart attack because those jobs are, you know, very intense. But yeah, it was that, like, I literally did what they wanted me to do and I didn't complain about it. You know, that was it for those smaller runner jobs. So then they knew they could, and they knew I was comfortable around race car drivers, because that's the other thing. It's like, can I actually trust you to be around an NBA player?
Right.
You know, and kind of the story I tell on that, it's not just NBA players. Like, I was hosting Justin Timberlake one night. It's pretty cool if you like NSYNC or if you like music or whatever. He's a big guy. And his guy told me that no matter how good I was, I wouldn't be able to keep people from getting to him. I was like, bullshit, I'll be just fine. And I was wrong. My security guard brought his 10-year-old daughter and like broke protocol to meet Justin. and his guy looked at me and said, I told you. And he was just laughing because, like, Justin is so big. It's like, well, like, Larry Bird worked at the Patriots when I was there. That's a huge name in sports. So it's like that's somebody's dad's favorite player ever. Like, and every day Larry gets told that, but that person talking to Larry doesn't get every day to tell him that. Well, Larry doesn't want that necessarily. So if it's the three of us in the elevator and you're like, oh my God, Larry, my dad loves you. It's like, I don't know if I can trust them to work around players, because, like, you know, Michael Jordan will be in town soon, and Magic Johnson will come in town when the Lakers are there, that sort of thing. So there is this, like, let me see how they behave when they're behind the curtains.
Well, would people just show up with Indiana State jerseys and just say, "Hey, Larry, will you sign this?"
To Larry's credit, during any timeout when he sat in the stands at Pacers game when he was a GM, at any timeout, if you had a ticket, he would sign the ticket and people would line up, but he would never do it during the game or at halftime. But every timeout he'd take, which was pretty cool. And then from a staff standpoint, every first week of December, Larry would, through his assistant, would allow every employee to bring in one thing to get signed by him, because at the end of the day, everybody, if you're from Indiana especially, wants a Larry Bird autograph. And so that's how I would get Larry's autograph. But like, I never would ask for it, but like, he recognized his level. I'm sure Magic Johnson's that way. But like, so it's not that you can't ever show the truth, like, oh man, I love you type of a feeling, like they're used to it. It just, how much are you drawn to the celebrity of it? Because everybody is to a certain degree. It just, can you continue working when the work needs to get done? You know, the example I give a lot is like, everybody wants to work in sports and there's plenty of jobs. The beer vendor is at every game, but their back is to the basket. So like a lot of times what happens, people get in sports and they realize that they prefer watching the game than not watching the game. Because like I've attended over 1,000 NBA games in my life. Most of them I didn't watch because I was working.
So it seems like a monster of a job to create an environment where you can trust a group of 25 to 30-year-olds with your billion-dollar business.
Yeah, that's for sure.
What are your strategies to developing that environment and finding out if you can trust people?
That's a great question. So like for social, you know, the tough part about keeping your social media team staffed is that their profiles on LinkedIn are very valuable. They have a huge brand, an NBA logo, and a cool title, social media manager. So they get picked off a lot. So it's important to have kind of feeder systems of coordinators and part-time staff that can take a step up when somebody gets picked off. And so that's when I got to the Hawks, we increased the amount of part-time staff that we had for game nights because that's a fun thing to do. And so they could work games and prove over the course of 3 to 12 months. And then when the position opened, they were promised the first interview. And the majority of people that I hired in social in my 4 years there came through that bench. And that's also very nice to somebody that's taking a risk because you get a lot of overqualified people for a role like that, but it's their dream job. And so them knowing and trusting that that we will interview them when a position opens and that they get first crack is a very valuable thing to have. And so then to your question, it also keeps them on the best behavior. It's basically a 12-month job interview.
That's great. Keep the carrot dangling, right?
Yeah, and it's not forced, but I mean, it's just the nature of the business. But then like there's one guy who did that. He got promoted a little over a year ago. And then Overtime, if you're familiar with that brand, just hired him at like double his pay. And we were paying him pretty well to go run their social, you know, so like there, like, and he thanks me, like he thanked me just yesterday, like, man, this has been, thank you so much. Cause I didn't think that part-time role would go anywhere. And it proved otherwise. So now he's kind of implementing that in his area.
Cool.
Fire away. Yeah.
Anybody got, any guys got something?
Oh, what kind of tools do you use? What kind of technologies in doing what you do? Any adaptive AI or anything? Or?
So, you know, from a social media standpoint, Sprout Social is a platform. There's a few out there like that that's used for tracking and distribution. And so it's the worst part of any social media person's job because they have to tag the posts down to the content pillars that we've established. So then we can actually evaluate if that content is worth continuing. So if you kind of think of, you know, like if you're familiar with Agile from a product standpoint, you can have Agile content marketing because you could go out very traditional and create a 10-part series that goes over the course of the year. But if it dogs after the first couple episodes, you already got the rest in the can, you're going to run with it. Or you can iterate along the way and get more content out there and let fan reaction be the only determining driver. And so what's nice about that, it decreases expectation from the staff at large, because like you're willing to try things a bit more. And then the upside from a platform standpoint, it's like we have to tag it and use it appropriately, or we won't be able to report on it to evaluate if we should continue or not. So that is a big platform that we use. I mean, certainly if you get into like video editing, you could assume what that side of the fence uses. You know, there's project management tools that allow for collaboration across departments, not just within marketing. So there is an element of transparency on what we're working on as well, because, you know, as the marketing team, you're pushing everything out, but you're also creating everything. And so you have a lot of people in the organization, like, where the hell is my thing type of a question frequently. And so having those, it used to be Percolate. Now the Hawks use a platform called Hive for project management, because you have a larger staff, and you can't run it like a ma and pa like sports teams used to be run, and some still are. They've become much more corporate in that regard.
Rob, just to drill down further on that, because that's super interesting. So is it layered? Like, so in real time, you have information that's happening, scores, what players are doing, crazy things, this, that, and the other. Then you have like content that you established and developed and produced that you put in intermittently if things aren't really kind of going, blowing up or whatever that you'll put in. Do you have like a bunch of tiers of information that you kind of are managing for social that way?
I mean, that's the intent. The reality is, and it's built that way, Rick, for sure. The reality of it is the sport is so human that usually your best content hasn't happened yet. It's going to happen during the game, and it's how you react to that. Whether it's just straight highlights, which are still to this day awesome, but like any type of memified approach to it where you're kind of having fun with it. With a player like Trae Young, an exciting player that, he can embarrass a lot of guys on the court in a fun way, break angles sort of thing. And if you're playing a team like the Philadelphia 76ers, like the Hawks played in the playoffs last year, their fans are jerks. They literally found a designer on our team and found her personal accounts and targeted her, and she didn't do anything. They assumed that she was running social. She didn't. She just had 100 replies on their Twitter one time, and that's scary, right? So we were like, well, let's go after them. And that ended up being our best content. It was like a 10 p.m. at night type of thing, and that's where the trust comes in. But if you're looking at the structure of it, one thing that we did at the start of the pandemic that we had been talking about having forever is having more evergreen content that we already have created that we can go to, both like it's finished and ready to post, or that's prepared for certain moments like, national days, National Puppy Day type content. That's just an easy thing that you can prepare for. That's kind of boring to do. It always does well because it's relevant. And the evergreen content is nice because once we started setting goals and having expectations from like a KPI standpoint, if the video team doesn't get the content piece done in time, we don't have anything to post. And so you have to go somewhere to be able to hit your numbers because you're expecting that no different than a television show. And so having evergreen content in the bank allowed us to not lose traction on the data side of it from a KPI standpoint, excuse me. But ultimately, if you look back on any NBA team, their best content from a total engagement standpoint or impressions or whatever you're going to go with is always some crazy highlight. The Warriors going to be some Steph Curry 3 that you don't expect. Lakers going to be some breakaway LeBron dunk, right? Like that dunk over Kevin Love the other night. Like those are always going to be the best because, everybody likes a cool highlight, whether you like sports or not, if it comes across your feed.
Go ahead, Phil.
To anyone interested in getting in the field, what would you say like some of the first steps you would recommend to get your foot in the door?
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to what it always has been. It's harder. It used to be, it doesn't matter how smart you are as long as you'll work hard. And there's still room for that. Like working hard is still important, but like these jobs take somebody that's really sharp now. I mean, like the web developer of the Hawks, really smart. Like he's a great web developer, but just a smart guy that also knows the business of sport. So like you have a lot of unicorns in that regard. So to your point, it's like, well, you can either find a job that you're probably overqualified for, and that means you're not going to get paid what you think you should get paid when it comes down to it, or be doing the work that you have the skill to do. You'll get in there and then prove yourself, and then they promote you because you'll get picked off and leave, especially in a market like this. Or you can do what many people have done, which is like, look, I don't want to go through a beat down route of a job that doesn't pay very well, but I want to work in sports over these next few years. So I'm like, what do I want to work in? Let's say it is you want to be a social media person for an NBA team. What is a comparable role? There's a lot of them out there. Like every brand now has some element of a social position. So getting into that position and getting a transferable skill sets. But the key to it is also finding ways to network with people in the industry because it's still a small bubble of people. And so that can be very hard, especially in these early stages of moving from a career standpoint. And what I would recommend in that tactically, it's like, well, I'm one of those people now that knows a lot of people in sports. I've built that up over 20 years of working in sports. If I go back to when I was a teenager, and so like if you connect with me on LinkedIn and one day you see X ABC sports team is hiring a position that you'd like to be considered for and think you could, and you go and look and we have mutual connections, or you see that I have a connection at that team, then you'd be like, yo, do you know Tom very well? Insert team. If so, would you mind introing me or forwarding my resume along or something to that effect? And that's how one way to get in front of the hiring manager. Because normally if I ask somebody like, hey, you should consider this person just for an interview, they'll at least email you, maybe take a 10-minute get to know you type of call, which is a huge step in the interview process. Outside of that, every team has in-person networking. It's really a group sale where you can buy a ticket to a game, and then pre-game you can go and meet executives in a business type get to know you setting. Those still are going on. They have virtual versions of that. I would say if you're kind of reaching out to people cold, you have this window as a student where you can say, hey, I'm a student at this school and I'm doing this project type of an approach. People tend to accept those a little bit more. And then you're just kind of building up that network. I focus on LinkedIn. That tends to be the best spot. If there's others, go that route too. That way, when a job is posted, an opportunity is there, you have somebody to reach out to that works there. And then the cool thing over time that I've got to experience is that like people move and shift jobs. Obviously, a lot of people are doing that now, and they go to great companies that I would want to work for. And so that's helped me in my career where I've seen them go places and like, hey, if there's ever a role, let me know. And that's how I got picked off at the Hawks, actually.
So Mr. Laycock, I'm working on this team project with ClubIT, and it reminds me a lot of the work that you're doing. I was wondering if I could follow you on LinkedIn.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's,
Thanks a lot.
I have it open right now. So whoever is, I certainly accept. And somebody, I forget who it was from Maricosta, looked at my LinkedIn maybe a week or so ago. That's how I knew that this date was coming up.
I think that was me.
Excellent. Yeah, and like one thing to do, it's easier on desktop than mobile, but like putting in a small note, because like when you are on a team side, I used to get like, I don't know, 20 cold emails a day from companies. Those decrease with spam filters, but I mean like legit. And my rule that I had was I would always reply to people that were local based companies, because my feeling was let's say it's 10 a week and I worked there for 10 years, I'm pissing off thousands of people if I don't respond to them. Well, some of them are really good at sticking out. From a student standpoint, what you can do, like just put a little note in there, hey, thanks for speaking at the class, because I'll get 100 in a week. And like, I don't recognize the person, I don't pay attention to it, but the note sticks out and it's like, oh yeah, accept that real quick. The other nice thing about things like LinkedIn is that executives that have assistants tend to still have those messages go to their phone and not get filtered through like traditional email. A lot of corporations, especially not on the team side as much, the EA checks the email for the executive, especially an older executive. Well, you can get to them through kind of that LinkedIn way, because that notification comes up on their phone. And so like, you want to be very prepared with how you communicate with them when you reach out, but like being aware of that, it's like, hey, that's how you can get to somebody. And maybe it takes 10 of those to get one response, but it's still an effective way of getting people to respond for a job search.
Very cool. Thank you.
So quick question, esports.
Yep.
So how are you seeing that evolving as building, as a building opportunity within kind of the online space?
I mean, like from an NBA standpoint, like the majority of teams have a 2K team in the NBA 2K league, and so from just that standpoint, like, look, it's a $1 billion industry for a reason. NBA owners see that. I think from just like a under 18 standpoint, like kids that are 10, 11, 12 that are, that are participating in video games, whether they can call themselves an esport athlete or they're just an active user, like the skills that they're developing from that, the technical skills, obviously, but also like a lot of these games like Rocket League, they are 3-on-3. It takes really good teamwork, really good communication. Like, so the fundamentals of basketball, and if you're a good teammate, apply to the fundamentals of esports. Well, that's what you need in college settings. That's what you need in corporate settings, are people who can work well with others. And from an esports standpoint, you're normally playing them in a virtual setting like this. It's really hard in a corporate office to have collaboration that's exclusively Zoom based, but that's, where so many teams are. Even like the Hawks have a hybrid situation where you can work from home a couple of days a week. So you certainly have to have that. So I think from those skill sets, that's crucial. But like, even from the business I'm in now, like I personally believe that the facility that we're building, the first one, will have about 10,000 square feet dedicated to esports, with an amphitheater and 50 terminals and an education area. And so we are going to have day camps for kids when they're out of school, like summer camps, that are esports only, but where I think it's pretty cool, it's a hybrid. You come in the morning, you have a couple hours of esports camp, and then you have lunch, and then you have the afternoon of playing that same sport. You can play 2K in the morning and play basketball on the hard court that afternoon, applying what you learned. And to me, it's just the next step of watching film and applying what you learned in film.
So when you're modeling, so when you're looking at it, you're building your financial models, understanding the customer themselves and understanding kind of what their value is. Do you have any ways that you really kind of define your understanding of the customer and what their value is to your companies? Whether it's the Hawks and looking at, are they purchasing merchandise? Are they buying tickets? Like, how do you, step us through kind of how you evaluate value? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting part about a sports team is that, the Hawks have been around over 50 years, and there was a guy that was in his 90s that had been a season ticket holder for 50 years. So he claimed, we didn't have any data to prove him wrong, but we believed him. And so like, kind of backdating your customer lifetime value is an interesting homework assignment. But if the driver in NBA teams of revenue, an NBA team is a local marketing brand with an international equity of brand. I kind of said that funky, but generally speaking, anybody working for an NBA team, for the most part, is focusing on their local market, even though their followers on Facebook or Instagram or wherever are majority or half international. That's the beautiful thing about the NBA as a pro. So from a customer lifetime value, you're not as worried when you're on the team side about making money off the fan in the Philippines necessarily. That's more the league office that's handling that when it comes down to it. You're worried about the fan that, if it's the Los Angeles Lakers, somebody that lives in LA area, and you're trying to get them to go to one game by buying a single game ticket, because the ticket is the driver of all of the revenue for the most part. Nobody bought a hot dog at crypto.com arena, I think is the name of it, that didn't have a ticket, right? So you try to sell merch, LeBron James jerseys, you can sell them online, but you actually have a higher margin sold in the venue just by revenue sharing rule. And so even from that standpoint, you want them to buy bricks and mortar and not on your online site. And then over the long haul, what you're attempting to get is that person to become a season ticket holder, whether it's for their company or for their family or a hybrid. You're trying to stair step them to the point where they have a 41 game package. Because if that's now a lifestyle, like that's what you're known as. If you've known anybody with tickets, like, oh yeah, Rob's neighbor, they have insert sports team tickets. Better be nice to them if you ever want to go to the game. Like there's this type of like feeling of power that season ticket holders have from that regard. But the truth is they normally built over time from that. They went to one game, they started going a couple games, and it became a part of their hobby. They became a part of what they do. Where most people, if you didn't go to a game this past year, going to 41 games is a commitment, even if they're free. It's just like driving and parking. Even if all that's free, it's hours. It's a 150-hour commitment over the course of a year. Like how many people have that free time? So you try to stair step them to that point and then just renew the relationship over time.
But that can only be for people who are local, right?
Hold on one second.
You all right there?
My camera, I'm fine. My camera just fell. I can hear you. What was the question?
I'm glad it's just your camera. What was my question?
That was just the local.
Oh, yeah, so you can only get the season ticket holders for local people, but you do have an international audience. How do you corral them?
How do you corral them from a ticket standpoint or just revenue in general?
Revenue in general, because you're not gonna get them to take the season tickets, you know, if they live in Europe.
Yes. So the NBA, like every league's a little bit different. From an NBA standpoint, the rule is you are restricted to 150-mile radius of where your arena is located. And so that rule was really put in place to protect national deals, like national TV deals and national sponsors. So then that allows, I don't know who the Lakers have as their TV. Actually, who is what is it? Sportsnet, Rick?
For who?
For Lakers home games in the local market,
Yeah.
right? So Sportsnet is a deal the Lakers cut, but the ESPN, TNT, ABC deal is a deal the NBA league office cut. And so Kia can be an NBA league partner, and that's okay. And a local team can have Chevy as a sponsor because there are local assets. Like even Lakers.com has geofencing where you'll see different banner ads in California than Indiana. So and the reason they do that is to protect the national and international TV deals. And if you think about the 1990s and Michael Jordan, I was not at the Pacers at the time, but like Chicago and Indianapolis are 2 to 3 hour drive away. There was a lot of Bulls fans at Pacers games in those 90s. And if the Bulls were allowed to market like actively, they would have owned the whole state. They would be a huge brand like, you know, Chicago Cubs were able to do because they did that back in that day. So the way we make money off them is that the league has allowed some test components from a social media standpoint, because the truth is brands are buying deals on a local level, getting you to post to social and then getting the international benefits. So they're skirting the rule that way. And then the other truth is these TV deals on a national level that create blackouts and those sort of things are pains in the ass. It's very difficult to find where the game is for the casual consumer, and you need casual consumers to find it quickly, otherwise your ratings are low. So the League Pass is a nice product, but it's expensive, you know, $100 to $300 depending on when you buy it. But they're starting to sell like one-offs, 1 days, 1 games, parts of season. Well, and then the league's like, hey, local team, will you promote this to your international base? And if you sell anything, you'll participate in those economics. Long way of explaining it, but there is some component there. But ultimately, like the team, like they want the large following number, because when you have a sponsored deck, you say, look, we have millions of followers. The truth is, you know, there's local brands in every market that have more local followers than the team.
So,
Like,
so when you're talking about schedules though, like if you have a game scheduled against a team that has a featured player, like if you're happy because you're trying to get tickets, and you know everybody, you know, in Atlanta wants to see LeBron play, or
that's right.
you know, fit. So when you're scheduling, are you taking that into account too, as part of your?
Yeah. So, day of week is an important driver of sales. Monday, Tuesday is tough compared to a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or day game Sunday. And so every team has somebody in charge of booking for their arena. And the NBA has a setup where you can say you have so many dates where like, please guarantee me this date. For the Pacers, it was the day after Thanksgiving was a big day for the Pacers. And then most of them are like, we would really like to play these dates because we have these holds for these concerts, that sort of thing, right? Live Nation or AEG. And then the NBA takes every team, put it in their system, and then spits out the first draft of the schedule. Goes to the team for review, and no team thinks they get a good schedule. The basketball people say it's too much traveling, too many back-to-backs, whatever. And then the business side is like, we didn't get enough Saturdays, or that sucks. We have the Lakers early in the season. If we had them later in the season, we can leverage that game and holiday packs and that sort of thing.
Were you managing those events as well as not only were you managing the Hawks, but also the live events that were happening in State Farm Arena?
Yeah. So the Hawks we owned. We didn't own, whatever Live Nation show would come through. Typically, they would just rent the building. Sometimes there's a co-promotion where you participate in the upside, but you also take on some of the risk. But in a market like Atlanta, it's a great music market. Justin Bieber was just there, had 2 shows on a Monday, Tuesday, both sold out. Justin couldn't do one show in Indianapolis unless it was a Friday or Saturday night. So that's a big part of the business for a team like the Hawks, because when you buy certain premium seats, club seats, suites being 2, you get that seat for every show or every game, not just Hawks. So when the Hawks are not very good, you remind them of the great concerts you have coming through that next year so that they renew their seats. When the Hawks are great, you have the benefit of both.
You guys have no questions? I know we've got to let Rob go here pretty soon. So if you've got questions, it's
Yeah, let's hear it.
How do you use data analytics to focus or to find your cluster, your groups, your customer groups?
Yeah, I mean, so obviously a lot changed with just how Apple changed, but even the mentality is the same. I think the first step is that with a lifestyle brand, especially a sports team, everyone has enough of a foundational understanding of it. They probably went to a game or they've watched a game that they think they're the target consumer. So my first thing that I like to do is make sure people remember that, hey, you don't pay for tickets anymore. So it's tough for you to actually be a present day consumer. You've been here for a while. And so what I've done, I did at Pacers, did the Hawks, is that I visualized our best customer profiles. And so that takes some primary data, like doing focus groups and surveys and such, and then blending it with some secondary data from Axiom and, maybe some surveys the league did, whatever the case may be. And then we had like 8 to 10 people that when we had like fake cartoon drawings of them. So then when we were talking about a product, everyone spoke from the mindset of our target market, not their family or their neighbor.
Right.
And so to me, that's a big one. And then once you have that, it's pretty easy to do lookalike campaigns, or like, because we have stair step of like, look, you bought 1 ticket last year, here's an email offer to come to a game this year. Those types of targeting are fairly easy. It's not like most brands that they really have to go feed that top funnel. The top of our funnel gets fed from social, to Rick's point earlier, or just the longevity of a brand that has 41 games a year, 15,000 people coming through. That increases a database that makes it pretty easy to target. It's just how good at you are at timing that out. What's your retargeting? What products are you creating? And then are you willing to sell them what they want to buy? Or are you going to try to force something that's more expensive or more games or both because of, economic incentive for the sales staff or whatever the case may be?
But the information brokers help you settle that, right?
Say that again?
I think you said to use Axiom, right? Or they used Axiom? they help you settle that out, right?
Yeah, I mean, like Axiom has Personas clusters, and there, I don't know, I think there's like 70 or 90 of them. Most NBA teams share the top tier. I think like Established Elite is one of them, but they have, like, you can Google it. They have like one pagers or two sheeters on each one, and it's a good peek behind the curtain at that type of person, not just household income, but like what media they consume, what their family makeup is, where they tend to live when they live in the market, that sort of thing. And then you could be like, hey, Axiom, give me more people like this.
Right.
And so direct mail is still an effective tool to use for something like a sports team, because the ROI can be high because you're buying, $100 seats times 5 or times 10, for a mini plan for an entry level pack. And so you can be highly targeted to 10,000, 20,000 households that have the money and the interest. It just, are they ready to buy? You don't know. But if you get 2% response rate, you're gonna hit the ROI you need. And then applying that mentality to everything is kind of where we go with that. I mean, like, connected TV was very valuable this past year. We could place ads, brand ads, we had a lot of them on Hulu. And then if you're on your phone on the same Wi-Fi network, we would have banner ads for tickets to the upcoming games. And they did really well, and so they were targeted, people that showed an affinity for sports, whatever the case may be. They were in the market and we knew their household income. That's really all you need for something as casual as an NBA team.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Well,
Could I ask one quick question about the analytics and the tools? Are you guys using dashboards, old school reporting? I mean, how real time is this?
Yeah, so the dashboards that we use are Tableau based.
Tableau, okay.
Yeah, and fortunately, like some teams, you'll get pretty old school, where like up until recently, the Pacers were still writing tonight's attendance on a piece of paper and handing it to the owner. Now Herb Simon's the oldest owner in the league, so we'll give him a pass on that. But from ownership on down, the Hawks, they use Tableau. There's an executive dashboard that ownership has access to that plugs in some of the data that we had, and then it drills down way wider, much more detailed too for, people on the marketing team or the sales team.
Right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, appreciate you coming.
Rob, I know you have a hard stop, so we're let's give Mr. Laycock a hand.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, appreciate you coming, Rick, anytime.
All right. Thanks again, Rob. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, see you guys. Bye.
Wow.
Fantastic, man.
Yeah. Super cool, right? So one of the things that I just want to kind of like download that, yeah, we felt like, I feel like the Prince of Darkness or something. Let's digest that for a second, right? Like, get your head around, like, people here that we're talking about sysadmin, right? Like, think about the complexity of the structure, right? The applications that have to be supported, the types of databases that have to be supported and protected, right? Because, one of the things he didn't talk about is, like, State Farm Arena was a place that was an election facility. And there was talk that, that election machines were being hacked, and like, there's all kinds of crazy things that you have to deal with, dealing with facilities and facility management and locking facilities down and protocols, right? So, again, he's literally dealing with digital marketing. A lot of times what we're talking about in sysadmin and cyber is that we're securing that for him. We're enabling that, like the bare metal, the server systems, right? Like that are transmitting and allowing, the data from, the games themselves. All those games and the facilities, not only the practice facilities, but they have monitoring that's happening for all the athletes. Like, I wish we would have had time to go into that, but that's super deep. Like, every single athlete, when they go onto campus, so they have a practice facility in the north. When they go onto campus, artificial intelligence are monitoring them. They have heart monitors. They know the point at which each athlete is fatigued, right? Like, so they can start to make assumptions by the step count that people have, the way that you're moving on the floor, whether or not you're fatigued, and how that's going to affect the next shot that you take on the court. Like, the sophistication is
off the chart, right? He's talking about literally his focus is getting people into seats, right? But if you think about the tier of finance like that is involved, all the billions of dollars that are involved in not only the ticketing, but the marketing, the merchandising, all the elements that are associated with maintaining all that structure, right? Like that is a super, super complex thing. And it's just one sports team. Like that, how many other kinds of sports teams are there? There's baseball, there's football, there's like, and they're all multi-billion-dollar industries, right? So when you think about it, like, don't get overwhelmed, like, oh my gosh, I could never do anything. There's plenty of room, right? There's plenty of room, and it's only getting, again, more sophisticated. The part that I want you guys to get your heads around is that no matter what business, it's all about money, right? At the end of the day, how do you keep the money machine going, right? Like, how do you keep it secure, right? We've got a lot of attack vectors. How do we lock them down so that the money machine doesn't stop, right? And how do we enable people with our sysadmin to do all the things that they need to do, to calculate all the pennies, to be able to be sure that the guy's going to take the best shot on the court when he's playing? Like, I mean, really? Like, so, again, you got to use your imagination. What are the things that are interesting to you? Because there's lots and lots of areas that you can dive into that are just, amazing in the space, right?
So it's me again?
Yeah.
Did I ask you
Yeah.
questions?
I see the compare and contrast with revenue-based adware, right?
Yeah, what was that, Frederick?
Oh, I just think about I was listening to him speak about the, revenue driving or adware driving revenue and fan interest and, even broader than that. And then the flip side to that is institutions that actually want to prevent ads from even being available
Yeah.
to because it's it's a foundation for malware-based attacks are becoming more common, using ads as a mechanism. So those are obviously two juxtaposed situations.
Yeah. I think that, there's always, you're talking about privacy too, like to your point, not only is it attack vectors, but it's also individual privacy. Like, what is the model that they're building of each one of us? Is that little, voodoo doll that looks like us that they can, press here or there and we can actually feel it? Like, what does that look like? And the more information, the battle for a corporation like that is to have more information about you. How do you look? How do you act? How do you walk? Like, them clinging to all the digital exhaust that is, in fact, that we leave around all the time, that becomes part of what their value is. So the information infrastructure that we're supporting and that we're developing our skills along these pathways at Mariposa, like, those are the things that are the future, right? Like, those are the future of economics. Those are the economic engines that are being generated. And I think a lot of the wrestling that's happening around that is, really fascinating. Like, the world that we'll live in a decade could be completely different than it is right now, and most likely will be.